It Takes Balls is brought to you by our new sponsor, D's Nuts. Yes, you heard that right. If you've never heard of them, check them out at grabdsnuts.com. But warning, these are not your grandparents' peanuts. D's Nuts is really shaking up the nut game. They're gourmet, fun, and packed with flavor. Whether you're a fan of savory flavors like ranch, sriracha, or hot cheddar, spicy like ghost pepper, or if you have a sweet tooth like me, you'll like the banana pudding. D's Nuts has something for everyone. But D's Nuts aren't just about taste, they're about making a difference. For every bag, can, or piece of D's Nuts merch purchased using the coupon code NUTCHECK on grabdsnuts.com, you can save 10%, and another 10% gets donated towards supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. So the next time you're craving a snack that's both delicious and meaningful, reach for D's Nuts. Because when it comes to supporting Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation, it takes balls and it takes D's Nuts. Available at grabdsnuts.com, Amazon, and Walmart locations nationwide. D's Nuts, a delicious, healthy snack in a variety of fun flavors and making a difference one nut at a time. The stories shared on It Takes Balls are unique to the individual sharing. Always speak with your trusted medical provider for treatment options specific to you. Welcome back to It Takes Balls, presented by Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation. Today I'm joined by two gentlemen from Fennec Pharmaceuticals, and we're going to be talking about cisplatin-induced hearing loss, the options that are available, and where you can get more information. For complete transparency, this episode is not sponsored, and there's been no money exchanged for this interview. But I do want to note that Fennec has been working with Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation through sponsorships to raise awareness of cisplatin-induced ototoxicity. So Eric and Ruchit, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, Stephen, thanks for having us. Yeah, I guess I'll start. I've been with Fennec for about 18 months, and boy, Fennec's a great story. We can get into that, but I kind of work with marketing, all the commercial elements of what we do here.
Great. Ruchit?
Hey, thanks, Stephen. Yeah, Richard Parikh. I have been here only a couple of months. I'm kind of the new kid on the block, but I work as the director of medical affairs here. So I'm more on the medical side, working on our medical messaging, reviewing any sort of studies or research proposals that come through, and pretty much working very closely with the practitioners out there.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So with testicular cancer, cisplatin, we're so grateful for it being, one of the keys in the curative treatment of testicular cancer. But with that comes the hearing loss. So are you able to explain what the cochlea is and how it works and how this cisplatin affects that?
So basically, I mean, if you kind of think of the ear, you've got the outer ear, which is what we see, on everybody day to day. Then you got the inner ear. The inner ear is what we're kind of referring to when we talk about cisplatin-induced ototoxicity. It's interesting because if you look at the development of the inner ear, and I apologize if I get too into the weeds here, but it's pretty much fully formed at like 23 weeks gestation. So it's the same as, it is kind of an infant to a child, to an adolescent, to a young adult, etc. The mechanism by which cisplatin actually leads to ototoxicity is it gets trapped in the inner ear and just kind of hangs out there. And when it does that, it starts destroying the hair cells that are used to basically transmit sounds. So that's the mechanism, very high level as to what's going on there.
So why is it that cisplatin does this? Do we know, or is it just the way it is?
Yeah, well, we know, first of all, cisplatin for decades, as you know, Stephen, has been used in multiple tumors, including testicular cancer. And it does exactly what it's supposed to do, which is fight the tumor. And it's a absolutely critical element of cancer care and chemotherapy. As cisplatin is metabolized, right, it pulls up in the inner ear. As Ruchit said, the inner ear doesn't circulate very well. So you have this pooling effect, and what's left of those metabolites as cisplatin breaks down after it works on the tumor is toxic to these tiny little hair cells. And you effectively have to neutralize what's remaining of cisplatin in the inner ear. And now, good news, there's now treatments available to do so, which allows doctors to start talking about this sort of preventive element of hearing protection during the planning stage of treatment and chemotherapy, rather than at the end when you're dealing with hearing aids and cochlear implants and that kind of thing. So if you're able to clear out that buildup of what's left of the cisplatin and the free radicals, then you've protected, which is sort of a one-time thing. These little hairs that are in your ear, that's it. You get one ear, and if they're damaged, it's permanent.
So who is most affected by this cisplatin-induced hearing loss? Is it younger patients, or is it older patients, or is it everybody?
Yeah, I'll take it on a demographic basis, and then Ruchik can dive in if there's depth to it. But it can be, the bottom line is it can be anybody, right? Because cisplatin is used across multiple tumor types. But let's just talk about hearing loss per se. It could be as soon as the first dose, in a cycle of cisplatin therapy. It could be later in therapy. I've talked to patients who one young man woke up after his 6th or 7th round of cisplatin and couldn't hear and had no discussion about it in advance. So it was quite a surprise. It can happen early. It can happen late. It can happen mild. It can happen severe, right? It can result like ringing in the ears, or it can result in 80, 90% hearing loss where you're dealing with really profound impact to your life. It's across the board.
Yeah, Eric, I think you hit it on the head there. Yeah, it's kind of it'll happen if it's going to happen, right? It's not like because you have a certain tumor type, you're higher at risk or lower at risk, or if you're a certain age, you're higher at risk or lower at risk. It can happen to anybody.
Yeah, depending on the scale, Stephen, the hearing loss can be 60% or 90% related to treatment with cisplatin. I mean, there's multiple hearing scales and incidence and prevalence rates, but it's a real problem.
And I think the other thing is like it can happen with the first dose. It can happen, as Eric mentioned, there's a patient that happened after the 6th cycle, so it can happen at any point too.
I'm fortunate. I was 25 at the time. Not that makes any difference, but I only have like some slight ringing every once in a while. But I know it can be a lot worse. What are like some of the long-term effects for people who have this other than hearing loss? I know like it can affect them socially and things like that.
Yeah. So you said it. Now, nobody wants to be treated for cancer. Obviously, not the patient, not the parents, not the caregivers. I'm sure the doctors don't want to do it if they don't have to. But the younger a patient is, think about it. If you have a 2-year-old who's developing their auditory skills, learning the vocabulary, learning social interaction, right? Learning how to listen, learning how, learning how to communicate, and that's interrupted permanently, that's a huge problem long term. Whereas if you're 25 and you already have those skills, the human brain can compensate a lot better. It just depends where the issue hits and how much people are affected by it, by the severity of hearing loss and by where they're at in development.
Is it just cisplatin, or is it any kind of platinum-based chemotherapy? Because I know sometimes guys with testicular cancer are treated with carboplatin as well.
Well, we know from the platinum therapies that hearing loss can be a factor either way. There are certain treatments available, but it depends on what chemotherapy you use based on their indications, right?
Yeah.
But we know from the platinum-based therapies that hearing loss is a possibility.
All right. And we talked about these options that are available. I don't know how much you can delve into those, but who is like the primary patient population that is receiving these options that are available?
Yeah. So I think it definitely varies. We know that there's pediatric patients, adolescent patients, young adult patients that are probably the majority of the group, but that's not to say that there aren't adult patients that are also eligible and receiving these therapies. It really depends. You asked the question of what kind of impact does this have, and Eric brought up the point of a 2-year-old that's still developing their speech, but think about a 30-year-old that's been hearing their entire life and then they lose their hearing. I mean, it can still have the same impact. You start having career limitations, lost earnings, et cetera at that age. So it really depends. And I think that there's no well-defined age group for this, or specifically defined age group. I think it's all patients across the board that are receiving cisplatin.
If you're able to, are you able to talk about the process of, like, since you're Fennec Pharma and you are in like the drug world, what is like the process of getting something FDA approved?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's long. It's long and it's expensive. I think those are kind of the two things that everyone always equates to developing a drug. But basically, you end up having, your proof of concept stage where you've discovered something. You kind of go through your preclinical trials just to understand, is this, viable or something that we can move into actual human studies. When you get into human studies, you've got small studies that basically establish safety. You've got to make sure your drug is safe, first of all. You get a little bit of efficacy data, but then you move into larger trials where you start assessing efficacy, and the time frame can take, anywhere from, I don't know, 10 years to, however long, depending on what happens along the way. But basically, the clinical trial phase can take about 10 years or so. And that's, including a phase 1, a phase 2, and potentially a very large phase 3. And depending on the conversations you're having with the FDA, you may need 2 trials. I mean, we've got 2 trials. You may need more than that. You may only need 1. It depends on the therapeutic area you're playing in, but it's definitely a long process.
How long has Fennec been involved in kind of the cisplatin-induced hearing loss and things like that?
Yeah, I can tell you, I've been here for 18 months, but our founders have been at it for, over a decade, almost 14 years now. And I mean, it's been a real journey, kind of a vocation in a way. They took this little company on, and like Ruchit mentioned, it took a decade to complete the trials. And, when you're talking about trials in cancer and trials in children up to 18 years old, those are tough trials to find patients for, because you got to be careful, right? You have to talk about survivability, right? So if you're testing something, not everybody's going to want to jump into a trial. But dedication and perseverance, they've been at it for 14 years. And it's really, I mean, it's a great company. There's 25 of us. We're a small crew, but we roll up our sleeves and get a lot done.
All right. So we talked about like the social impact, like you mentioned the 2-year-old who's kind of developing and everything, but what is like the long-term financial impact of hearing loss?
Yeah. I mean, most insurance plans don't cover hearing aids. So that could be $4,000 or $5,000 alone. There's a social impact to hearing loss, Stephen, in that if, depending on the severity, but if, let's say somebody ends up with hearing aids, you're in a crowded place with hearing aids, you're amplified, that crowd noise is amplified. I've spoken to folks who have directional hearing problems where they can't tell where the sound is coming from, Employment can be an issue. I know a young man who works at a car wash. His family has car washes, and when the cars are in the car wash going through the, on the track, if something goes wrong, these alarms go off. Well, he can't hear them. So now you got somebody in the car wash, the alarm's going off because something's wrong with the brushes or something, and he's over there doing something else. It just messes up everything. There's some data from out of Canada that suggests that overall to 65 years old, significant hearing loss could cost $400,000 or $500,000. So it's a big impact.
Wow. Where can people go to find more information about these options that are out there and maybe be armed with this information to take to their doctor before they start cisplatin?
Yeah, the good news is the awareness is growing. A lot of the patients we talk to, when they find out about their diagnosis, they end up on Facebook, Instagram, social media, and the discussion of hearing loss in these groups is growing. So that's good. There's an awareness element that's already growing. In terms of us at Fennec Pharma, you can go to fennecpharma.com, which F as in Frank, ENNECPHARMA.com. Our logo is a fox with these big ears, and the Fennec Fox, it's really aptly named. It's great. It has these huge ears, and they can hear for miles. And we've been at this for, like I said, 12, 14 years. And the idea is to help preserve hearing in that chemotherapy space. So there's a lot of information on fennecpharma.com. And there's more all the time on an awareness basis, like I said, with the social media out there.
Great. Thank you guys so much for being on It Takes Balls.
Yeah, great name for a podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
For more information and resources for your testicular cancer journey, visit testicularcancerawarenessfoundation.org. You can also follow us on social media at Testis Cancer. We're on Facebook at Testicular Cancer Awareness Foundation.